We used cedar shakes for the top 2/3 of the end walls to give the house a bit of character. We actually bought the shakes on impulse one day and had them sitting around in boxes for quite some time. They have a rough side and a smooth side, just like the bevel siding, and they came in just a bunch of random widths. The first thing we had to do before putting them up was attach rainscreen strips horizontally every 6 inches where the nail would be passing through the attached shakes. The nails get concealed by the shakes, unlike the bevel siding. We used the same horizontal strips as we used for the tops and bottoms of the walls and above and below the windows, except we cut them in half lengthwise so we'd only need half as many. The first strip needed to be about 7.5 inches on center above where the bottom edge of the first row of shakes would sit, so that the nail would be hidden by the next course of shakes. Once the rain screen was on, it was time to attach the first row of shakes, which is actually a doubled up row. You need to double it up, otherwise there would be gaps between the shakes and they wouldn't stick out as far as every other row afterwards. We cut the thick edge of these shakes off about 6 inches so that there would be the same amount relative under the first row of shakes as the rest. These starter shakes weren't stained, but we did stain some prior to installing. We didn't have a good system set up and decided to stop staining them beforehand, but it turned out that it was actually a lot harder to stain them once they were on the wall because of all the little gaps you need to try to get into. Plus, the manufacturer recommends you stain all 6 sides of the wood, so we were cutting corners by not staining them completely beforehand. We smartened up for the shakes on the front end of the house. I actually enjoyed working with the shakes. It was a slow process, but getting them around trim was pretty easy and they were fairly forgiving, since it was a random look anyway. The nails needed to be about 3/4 of an inch in from the sides of the boards, and the shakes needed to overlap the row behind enough to cover the nails and give a little extra so that water could never make its way behind. That row below the window was later glued on so that you wouldn't see face nails. The glue has held up fine so far. It was a pretty random process, just picking out appropriately sized shakes as we went, occasionally planning out a few at a time when we noticed it was getting weird or too uniform. For the last shake in a row, we would just rip one down on the table saw to the exact size we needed. Just like the beveled siding, we drilled out all the holes for the nails. It was so easy to split the wood that it was basically required. It slowed us down, but it was nice to be able to just stick the nails in the holes and hammer away. A nail gun may have solved the problem for us, but hey, we didn't have one, and siding was expensive enough as it is. Around all of the trim, we left 1/8 of an inch, and between shakes, we left 1/4 inch, as per the manufacturer's recommendation. These were very dry shakes. I think they're called kiln dried, so they'd be taking on moisture and expanding. I made a couple of little 1/4 inch spacers out of scrap 2x4, which I would definitely recommend doing. We went off the corner trim for the height of each row and clamped the string line just below the marks. You don't want to let any of the shakes actually touch the string because that would push the string down ever so slightly, and by the time you reach the end of the row, you may have pushed the string down enough that you're totally out. We just put it about a 1/16 below the mark and eyeballed the shakes about a 1/16 above the string. By this stage of the build, estimating 1/16ths was pretty easy. I didn't get any footage of staining the shakes once they were on the wall because I was already far too annoyed with myself for not staining them beforehand, but trust me, it sucked. Maybe I was just being way too picky about getting into every little crevice, but it was a long and frustrating process. So we came up with a way to quickly stain all of the shakes that would go up on the front end of the house. We were able to estimate how many shakes we'd need by going off what we used on the back end, and tacked in a whole whack of nails into 2x4s to hold the shakes while they dried. The only other thing I could think of was to drill a hole through them all and run a string through them all to suspend them in the air. I think that would have been a lot harder though. I also read that you could use clothespins and kinda hang them like laundry.
Look at all our shakes.
Oh, it's nails. Oh, look at them all. Look at all them nails.
Shakes. So many shakes.
We finished attaching the shakes over the next few days. At this point, it had been exactly 3 months since the start of the build. We could have definitely gotten to this stage a little quicker with both better planning and a stronger work ethic, but 3 months was our initial estimate of how long it would take to finish the exterior, so we just about made it. The actual amount of time spent had been around 400 hours. It rained heavily the first day, but was beautiful for the second. The weather overall was incredibly unpredictable this year. The year before was near drought conditions, but of course we had no shortage of rain during the summer when we decided to build a tiny house. As for money spent at this point, we were up to about $23,000 Canadian, after taxes, and that's including all the fees associated with importing the trailer to Canada, and we'd purchased quite a few tools at this point, plus some pretty expensive appliances such as the furnace and tankless water heater. If you didn't know, you can find a complete list of every single dollar spent on the tiny house at the Rookie Roost website. Just check the description below. The top few rows of shakes needed to be cut at angles, which the table saw took care of without issue, since it came with a miter attachment. I've mentioned in a previous video about a mistake that was made with the positioning of the fascia on the short ends of the house. It should have been sticking out further so that the shakes would just slip up underneath it and there would still be an ample air gap. Since that wasn't the case, we stopped the last row of shakes short about 1/4 inch under the bottom edge of the fascia, so that air would still have free passage under the fascia. From the ground, you can't tell at all. It was an amazing feeling to see the house fully cladded in exterior siding. For a couple of complete rookies, we were quite impressed with what we'd accomplished. Was it perfect? Hell no. Were we done? Not even close. But this was a milestone. It was undeniably a house. A tiny one at that. We had only a couple things left to do before it would be completely sealed in and ready to face the elements. Little did we know, one of the most emotional and trying times was just around the corner. It all started with some bad caulking. We'll dive into that in the next video. Thanks for watching. Hey, did you know you can get notified when new Rookie Roost videos go live? Just click on over to the channel page and find the little bell icon next to where it says subscribed. You are subscribed, right? After clicking the bell, check that box and hit save. Now you'll never miss a video, which means I'll definitely see you next time at the Roost.